My name is Simon Dugelet. I look after a lot of the consulting and development teams here at Microchannel, and today we're going to take a look at inventory control. We got quite a lot to pack into today's session, so I'm going to kick it off right now with a picture. So I hope you can all see this picture. The reason I thought I'd draw a little picture is to help us understand how inventory control fits into the rest of Sage 300. And you know that Sage 300 is a modularized system, so you kind of bolt in the modules, and you switch them on, and they sort of all work together. But there's a very definitive data flow that comes with the system, and this diagram that I'm showing you now, I hope kind of illustrates that. So we're going to be looking at the inventory control box today, bearing in mind that there's order entry and purchase order modules sitting side on to the inventory control module with some very key interactions happening there, so they kind of go hand in hand, but I'm just focusing on inventory control today. We'll have separate sessions for our order entry and purchase order modules in future. And just to highlight that data goes between inventory control and purchase orders and order entry, and then the only bit really that I'm missing here, and I'll do that right now, is a little arrow going from inventory control over to GL. So let me go right into Sage. Now the version of Sage 300 I'm using today is the 2014 edition. So the current version of Sage is 2016, and I thought I'll work on a 2014 version just so that in case you're not on the most current version, everything you see today you should be pretty confident you're going to have in your system anyway. So as with all the module training sessions that we do, I like to start off by diving into the setup area of the module, in this case inventory control, setup, and exploring some of the options available. They used to look like nuts and bolts icons, so I used to call them nuts and bolts icons, but recently Sage redid all the icons, and there's only a few gears and widgets now, no nuts and bolts. Anyway, I'm heading into inventory control, setup, and options, and this is the area where we can set up really high-level defaults and structure information around inventory control. Things like allowing fractional quantities, for example. You can see this little tick box here. You'll notice that once I tick this on, I can't tick this off. What it does is it changes the structure of the database so that when I'm entering a quantity for an item, I can enter it in as a, for example, 1.5 rather than just a whole 1. So because it's such a significant database structural change, once it gets switched on, you can't switch it back off. So it's one of those decisions that you kind of make at the start of your design of your inventory control module, knowing that you can go one way but not the other. Another useful tick box is the allow receipt of non-stock items. Now this also feeds through to the purchase order module, and basically means that I can set up an item in inventory control. I can flag that as non-stock, so it's excluded from Stocktake per se, but I can still then receipt that either in inventory control or in purchase order module as a way of marrying data together. Another useful tick box is this only use defined units of measure. Now this is a pretty neat enforcement where I can create, right over here you'll see an icon called units of measure. I'll pop that open at the same time. So I can create predefined units of measure and then enforce this predefined units of measure table by switching this on. Why is that useful? Well, particularly in some cases where people have different ideas about how the unit of measure each should be rolled out, where you may use EA or you may type in EACH and various other ways of doing it. This basically keeps it consistent and says, no, we're only going to use this particular variation of EA. You'll also notice conversion factors, and that's because when we set up an item, every item has a stock unit of measure. It can have multiple units of measure associated with it, as long as there's a conversion factor that gets us back to that stocking unit of measure. I'm going to move on now to the costing page. I'm not going to cover off everything because there simply isn't time, but this is a useful page. A lot of you, I'm sure, are still using inventory control, purchase orders and order entry, and then running the day-end process at the end of the day. In some cases, you may decide that you would like to have a more real-time scenario, particularly when you're posting within inventory control. And that's what this area does. So it says rather than running a day-end process for transactions that I post within the inventory control module, switch on the posting option so that if I post, say, an adjustment or a location transfer, it'll automatically post and update the other ledgers in the system without the need for me to run a day-end process. Now, right underneath that, you'll see create subledger transactions and ordered info during day-end processing or posting. And that just means that it can do the full hog of posting in inventory control and potentially creating the subledger transactions at the same time. Normally people will go for both unless, and I have seen instances where there's huge amounts of data, and to ease the burden on perhaps a server that's having problems, switching one on but not the other. Now, if you're using version 2014, you'll also notice you have these two tabs on the end, and that's because serialization and lot tracking is built into the inventory control module. In older versions of the system, and frankly I can't recall which version they updated this with, but in older versions of Sage, serialization and lot tracking was added in as separate modules in their own right. Now it's all bundled in together. So with serialization and lot tracking, there's various options that we can explore, such as assigning use-by dates to lots, suggesting that we'll quarantine certain lots, and then putting in number of days that quarantining can take place. In other words, before that lot becomes available to be used in some form or another, and so on. This page simply sets up a very high-level default for that. You can detail this down to the item level as well. So there's a little bit about options. Now I'm going to skip a few icons and move on to categories. Categories is a very neat way of ranging and profiling sets of items so that you know that we have various categories for our items. But what it also does, and probably more importantly as well, is it defines the P&L accounting information for the item. So if you're ever wondering, well, when I move an item, say ship an item, or invoice an item, what sales account that item is going to hit, well, that item will belong to a category code, and it'll be the category code that determines the sale account and the cost of goods sold account as well. You'll also notice an internal usage account listed down here, and that's another useful account, as you'll see today when we look at the internal usage transaction inventory control. I'll be covering that off later this morning. Next door to the category icon is the account sets icon, and similar to the category setup, I can also set up what I like to think of as the backbone of the item, and this is where we tag on our balance sheet accounts and our write-off accounts to our items. So again, if you're ever wondering when you're bringing an item in to the system, what inventory control account it's going to hit, well, every item will have an account set code that it belongs to, and within that account set code you'll see the inventory control account. Now, the other significant part about account sets is it also determines the costing method employed by the item. So as you know, that's equally as important when it comes to costing the item out when sold, per the cost of goods sold account. And you'll see there's a number of options here. So if you have multiple costing methods that you employ at your business, then you'll have the same amount of account sets, at least, corresponding to those costing methods that you want to use. So both very important icons. I'm now going to move on to Pricelist Codes. And this is where we set up a priceless code. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment, in inventory control, there are 3 levels of price list hierarchy. And this is the top level. So this is where we can go and set up a price list code. We can give it a name and then assign some overarching defaults, such as, we want to price by quantity versus weight. We want to have a selling price that we could potentially mark down or discount down based on percentage and type, or indeed amount. And then how we may apply those selling price based on types, shown here in a little table where we see A, B, C, D, and E, determined by customer type or volume discounts. And you'll see if I choose volume discounts, I now get thresholds that I can apply these to. Now, just to refer back to customer type for a moment, this ties back to customer master records. So I'm going to go and take a leap over to accounts receivable just to show you where that kind of joins together. So here I am looking at a customer record. Over on the invoicing page, you'll see there's a default price list for the customer. Okay. You'll see here we have the option to choose a customer type. So coming back to this screen here, currently this customer is set to a customer type called base, and you'll see where base comes into play when I go to the next level of pricing, which is where I actually set up base price. But interestingly enough, if I was to change the customer type for this customer to, say, A, at the highest level of my price list code, and bearing in mind that we'd also want them to be attached to this price list, you see the corresponding price list here. In fact, I might change that to B because that's a little bit more relevant. Then this customer would be entitled to a 2% discount off any item that they buy that belongs to this price list. If they were a C type, they would get a 5%, and D a 7.5%, and E a 10%. So that's how this customer type operation works, and it's just a simple way of allocating a customer type at a customer record so that there's already some rules coming in play when they buy an item from this price list. There's also a price check page at this highest level of Pricelist code where we can suggest we want to do a price check type that perhaps either shows a warning, an error, or actually requires approval. And we can elect to check based on unit price or sales margin. And if I choose sales margin, then I can choose from the following choices versus the unit price that's actually punched in to the transaction, and then look at that unit price and then check based on these rules. So if I say cost plus a percentage based on the last cost, for example, or markup cost, any of these choices that you see here, and then which users you might want the price check to relate to. If you use a default user, that'll apply to everybody. And then you simply type in the greater than percentage amount, in this case, or less than percentage amount. So this is a price checking tool that's available in the Pricelist code, and that permeates right down to the next two levels of price lists that I'm going to show you now. And I'll actually show you an example that in a transaction in a moment. So back into inventory control. We've just looked at IC setup and Pricelist codes. The next level of pricing takes place in IC items and price lists. And it's here, this little icon called item pricing. So if you think we've set up a bunch of defaults in the Pricelist code screen I showed you a moment ago, what this does is says, okay, well for each of those price lists, let's tag him against our items in our system. And then within each of those price lists for the items, let's allocate a base price. So this is your item price list, if you like. Now you can also set up default sales prices with a sales starts and end date, and then type in a sale amount here, and the system will know to kick in that price based on the sales start and end date. You'll see there's a few options for the base price type based on single unit or multiple units of measure, or calculated using a cost, where you may have a base price and then based on cost plus a percentage or cost plus an amount. And then you can even choose which cost you want to base that cost plus on. So some fairly intricate ways of allocating price to items. And then again, as you saw with the top level Pricelist code screen that we saw a moment ago, you have the ability now to just employ those defaults, or you can override them on an item by item basis per price list with different percentage amounts or fixed price amounts. Likewise for price checking. And so for this item, you can see that we've allocated pricing information for all the price lists that we've got in our sample system here, and they could potentially use a different permutation of price checking, discounts, and obviously the actual base price. So this base price is the kind of the starting point for how much are we going to sell an item for when we use a given price list. All right, so I've now shown two levels of price lists in the system, one being in IC setup where we saw the overarching price list code, the next being in IC items and price lists, item pricing, this one over here. The next level down is called contract pricing. And this is where we can agree on some terms with any given customers, and for those customers create their own contract pricing table. Now we can base that on category codes. So remember I showed you category codes before. Very good way of ranging our items into codes. Or we can do it individually item by item. So it could be that only specific items for specific price lists will enter into a contract arrangement with this particular customer. And you can even go simply for a fixed price for this item, for this customer, for this price list, and you can even set a start date and expiration date. Okay, so in terms of what overrides the pricing here, if you've got a contract price set up for a customer, that will always override any level above it. If not, that's okay. The next level will be item pricing. So whatever you've got in here, this will override what you've got at the top level, which of course is in IC setup, Pricelist Codes over here. Okay? So I hope that explains a little bit about the pricing structure in Sage 300. I'm going to move on now to the next section for today's session, and that is about setting up items themselves. Now, we've already taken a peek at item pricing. I want you to know, though, there's a little items wizard icon sitting over here. And what this screen does is it allows me to kind of set up an item but bring all these other icons into play through the use of a wizard. So rather than coming to items and setting up something here and then moving to vendor details and then customer details and so on and so forth, all these items are brought together quite nicely in this item wizard. Now I can either set up a new item here, or I can modify an existing item. So just to highlight, as I go through the next portions, I'm essentially going in and seeing what I would see if I went through every single item, every single icon on this page. It does simplify it though. Now you don't have to fill out every page as you're going along, but again, if you want to make sure you've captured all the information, I think this is the best way of doing it. Now while I'm on this page, I'll just quickly talk about manufacturer's item numbers. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience is using this, but imagine that you wanted to have AKA names for your items, also known as, if you like. Manufacturer's item number is a great way of doing this. So against each individual item in my system, I can create a separate list of names for the item. And the really neat thing about this is whenever I go perform a transaction, whether that be in inventory control, in the order entry module, or the purchase order module, I can type in any name that appears on this list and it'll automatically bring up this item. So if I was to type in, and just something very simple, lamp, if I go now and perform any transaction in the system in inventory control, order entry, and purchase order module, if I was to type in lamp, it'll bring up my A1 103-0 fluorescent desk lamp item. That's how manufacturer's item numbers work. So you can see as I flick through these pages that I'm getting every icon. You see we're up to the reorder quantities icon now. And no changes that I've made here, so I'm going to say finish. Now, it didn't show me the bills of material pages because I hadn't tagged the item as being a assembly or bills of material item. Now, I should point out, of course, that there are tick boxes here that we switch on to make that happen. Another option is to use kitting item. You'll see, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a grayed out box here called kitting item. And I guess the difference between that and a finished goods item, which is what an assembly bills of material item is you could switch this on for an item and it would then become a virtual item. And any of the components that you list under that kitting item are the actual items that would be employed whenever you transact against that virtual item. So there's a slight variation on the bills of material theme called kitting items, and think of it as a virtual item as opposed to a real finished goods item that we're going to be managing inventory on. Right. I'm going to move on now to some actual transactions because I want to show you how some of this stuff fits together. So let me go up one level and I'm going to do a receipt. You'll see in inventory control transactions I have the ability to perform receipts, shipments, internal usage and so on. Remember that most of you are probably using order entry and purchase order modules as well, which, as you know, interact very closely with the inventory control module. So it'd be unusual for you to use receipts and shipments if you're already using order entry and purchase orders. But let me just show you how this works, because if you're used to maybe adjusting stock in and out of the system, and you're not quite so comfortable with the adjustment screen, then receipts and shipments is quite a user-friendly and clean way of doing it. So if I want to do a receipt in some new lamps, I can just type in some information here that will be useful if I want to look back at this in 6 months' time. I can even allocate the receipt against a vendor number record, or I can simply override it. So it's not doing a check and saying, okay, well, you're going to get an invoice in now for this, and make sure that you type that in. So it's not a purchase order receipt entry. It's simply tagging that there's a vendor number in our system associated with this. As I say, I can override that and just come straight down to the detail area. Sorry, ignore that. Now I'm going to choose an item to receipt in, and of course I must receipt it into one of the locations that I have set up in the system. So I've got a few locations here, and it's worth pointing out that not only do I see the locations when I click into that location field, but I also see all my cost buckets associated for this item against these locations, as well as the costing method. Now you may find when you go into this finder that you don't see all this information. If you don't, you can click on Settings and go to Columns, where you'll be able to pick and choose from the unselected column those fields that you want to be able to view in the finder. So there's some really good information here. Now I'm going to select location 1, and we'll receipt, say, 10 of these items into the system, so that'll be 10 each. You'll notice that this item has been tagged as a lot tracking item. So as soon as I enter the quantity, I get a lot tracking screen pop up. It's asking me for an allocation, and I can say either make one lot or multiple lots, or I can say each lot has, and then specify the amount per lot. For example, if I'm receiving in 10 and I want to have 2 lots of 5, I can just type in 5 there. Now, the way I've set up my lots masking structure is that I'm going to increment my lot by a number, and that's this area here, so I'll get an 8 being the next lot number, followed by text. Now, this is quite a neat way of doing lot number tracking. I can type in a month, for example, so it's just text, and I can hit auto generate to get my lot number generated for each lot. So you see now I've got 8 August, 5 quantity, 9 August, another 5 quantity, because I said each lot has 5 eaches within the lot. And now if I look down here, you can see the remaining amount is 0. So once I've performed the lot allocation, and that's done because this item has been flagged as a lot item, I can either choose to accept the unit cost, which by the way is the most recent cost, or I can override it. And again, that's why it's useful sometimes to see this information in location, because I'll be able to see things like standard cost, if that number exists, as well as average cost. I'll leave that for the moment. And now I can either save this and come back work on it later. So I haven't posted it to the system. Now I can come back to it and I can post it, or I can just post it as soon as I'm done with it. Now I've posted that receipt into the system, and I can move on to the next transaction. Shipments, very similar to receipts obviously, but the opposite way around. So rather than receiving something in, we're going to ship it out. So again, I like to think of it as, it's almost like the adjustments area split into 2. Receipts coming in, shipments going out. Internal usage, on the other hand, serves a little bit of a different purpose because it allows us to identify items that we've consumed internally. So again, I can type, used a lamp for the kitchen. I'll say the finance department. And I'll choose my fluorescent desk lamp. And, oops. Oh, by the way, I just pressed F1 to bring up a help screen. I'm sure you're all aware that F1 is screen context help. If you don't, I always encourage, if you're in a screen, you don't know what something does, press F1 to bring up the screen context help screen. Very useful, very detailed. Goes down to field level, so I can search on every single field in the screen. Now I'm going to choose a location in this case, and then I'm going to type in a quantity. That'll be 1. Now remember, because this is lot tracked, I now get a lot number allocation screen pop up. And I can say auto allocate from, and then choose one of the lots that I have in my system. So here's the 2 that we generated a moment ago. Let's pick from there. So I'm now going to auto allocate this one of these items from this lot number. Okay. Now you'll see there's various other fields here, including usage account. So this is effectively where that item is going to come out of inventory and into P&L as a usage account. Now I can override that on the fly if I need to choose a different account. But that default is set up as part of my category code and account set setup. And then I can post. Now what I will show you is, rather than going through this shipments icon, I'm going to dart over to the order entry module, and I'm going to perform an order entry just to highlight the price check that we looked at earlier. So let me choose a customer, and I'm going to make sure that I'm using the right Pricelist code, because it's that Pricelist code that I set up price approval checking on. And down in my detail, I'm going to choose the fluorescent desk lamp. We'll order 10 of those. Now you'll see I've got a unit price here of $36.29, and I can do a lookup to see what the other pricing arrangements for that item are. Or I could simply type in my own price if I've got access to do that. Okay. Now I've typed in $10 here where it should have been around the $39 mark. If I go post, you'll see I get an error. It's forcing me now to get this approved before I post this document into the system. And that corresponds with this column over here called price approval, which has come up as yes. And now I must get someone who has the ability to approve this to actually come over and type in their username and password so that I can post this document. So that's how the pricing approval works, and pretty neat feature. I'm going to go back into inventory control because that's where most of this session is devoted to. And I'm going to look at IC transactions and transfer. Actually, I'll look at adjustments first. I just want to quickly explain. Some people get confused by the choices available in the adjustments screen. So I always like to point out, here you'll see something called adjustment type, and there's a few choices. Sometimes we'll get questions asked by users saying, look, we did some adjustments, and although we can see an effect on the actual stock quantity, our inventory control values haven't changed. And that's typically because the choice quantity increase or quantity decrease has been selected, as opposed to both increase and decrease. So if you are doing adjustments and you want to make sure that you're affecting both the stock quantity and the value, you must choose either both increase or both decrease when entering the transaction. I also often get asked about this, what is this bucket type? You'll see we've got offset bucket, specific bucket, or prorate. These are employed if you're using first in, first out, or last in, first out costing methods, LIFO or FIFO. And the way it works is whenever you receipt an item into the system through a receipt document, the system captures that for, amongst other things, this reason, so that if you're using FIFO or LIFO and I'm now adjusting an item, I can actually allocate it to a specific bucket or document. And that'll mean I'll go and choose the receipt that I want the item adjustment to be allocated to. Okay, so again, that's only employed if you're using the FIFO, LIFO costing methods. So I hope that that helps explain how some of this adjustment rules work. I'm going to just come out of here. And transfers, as you may expect, allows us to transfer stock from one location to another. Now you can also set up goods in transit locations, and I kind of think of these as virtual locations as opposed to real physical locations, meaning that if I do a transit transfer, the system will create a specific transfer transaction that won't show it in either the origin location or the destination location, but instead will show it in a goods in transit location. And that's very useful because it helps to keep track of what's actually in transit at the moment. So you would do a transit transfer record and a transit receipt record, of course, when it receipts, or rather when you receive it in the final destination. And assemblies is obviously used if you're using bills of material, which unfortunately I just don't have enough time to cover off today. But obviously when you're creating bills of materials for items, we're dealing with the creation of a finished goods item from a set of raw materials. And the assembly process is critical to take those raw materials out of stock, create a new finished goods item, and put that into stock. And that's what the assembly does. So moving on from transactions, I wanted to show now some of the inquiries and reports available in the system. And I'm going to start by showing you lot number inquiry, only because we've done some transactions today that have used lot numbers. Now this screen allows me to select either by lot number or by item, so I can go both or one or the other. So here's all the lot numbers in my system. Equally, I could just say, well, show me just for this item. And now I get a view of all the lots for this item. And within each lot, I can break that down and have a look at the transactions themselves. So here's one we did earlier in the session. So this is a great way of managing and tracking lot numbers. And of course, the same applies for serial numbers. In case you're wondering, the difference between serial numbers and lot numbers, serial number is a unique number that's tagged onto an item whenever that item is moved. Lot number is a way of uniquifying a range of items. So it's the same one item, but many of, all tracked by one lot number. You know, very typically used in pharmaceutical industry, where you'll batch a particular medicine, and that batch will be one number, but there'll be multiple packs of the medicine. And so in terms of being able to recall things like that, that lot number becomes a very critical number to trace and track. Back in statistics and inquiries, there's something called item location detail quantity inquiry. Geez, that's a rather long-winded name there, but it kind of takes location details screen, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, down to the next level. So I just wanted to quickly show you, if I choose an item and I choose by all locations, I can instantly see what's on sales order, what's committed, and quantity on purchase order. So if I want to see what's on sales order, here's my list, and within here I can drill in and see the order itself. So that's a very good detailed quantity inquiry screen. And of course the other main location detailed screen, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, is right here. And here I get to see quantity on hand, on purchase order as well, and of course I can drill in from here also. I can also see the costing buckets. You'll also notice there's a column over here called lead time, and in brackets SIA. That stands for Sage Inventory Advisor, which, just out of interest, is a Sage branded module that sits on top of your Sage 300 system and performs inventory optimization. I don't know if you've heard of the Sage Inventory Advisor module. We have quite a few customers that use it, and they swear by it. Now, if you are interested to find out a little bit more, and I'm not going to try and turn this into an advertisement, but I suggest have a look at this website called netstock.co/tour, and it'll give you a very good taste of what Sage Inventory Advisor does. So Netstock is the actual product. It's been rebranded by Sage for the Sage suite of products. Now, another reason I wanted to point this out is there's been a lot of rumors about Sage actually bundling in a light version of Sage Inventory Advisor into the Sage 2017 release, or within a product update of 2017 release. Now, it is a rumor, so please don't go out and quote me on this. But as far as my understanding is, it'll be a light version, not a full product, and I guess it's going to give you some of the features, but not all, of Sage Inventory Advisor. So that's going to be a very useful addition to the inventory control suite in upcoming version of Sage 300. All right, so I'm getting close to the end of the session, and I want to show you some reports that are very useful in the system. So I've shown you a couple of the inquiry screens. I'm now going to move into stock control screen. And the two reports that most people tend to use in here are item valuation and inventory movement. So the item valuation report allows us to view, obviously, what our current item valuation is. And we can view that in two ways, either by location detail costs, and this is a as of now position, or at transaction cost level, which takes it down, I guess, into a period range level. So we could potentially see what the item valuation was at a given point in time. So that's quite a useful report. Now, if I go run the as of now version, I can select up to 4 costing methods to display on the report. I'm sure you've all seen this before, but I'll run it anyway. Just have a quick look. So here's my costing buckets over here, along with quantity on hand and the stocking unit of measure. Okay. And another useful report, I think, is the inventory control stock status report. And that is contained, where is my stock status report? Let me see. stock status report, item status, that's the one right there. So this just gives me information about the items, and again, just useful if you're doing a maintenance or review on your items in the system. And finally, just keeping in the theme of our lot tracking that we've been looking at throughout the course of this session, I thought what I'd also show you is something called, now I need to go find it, lot recall and release. Here it is. It's under Inventory Control, Periodic Processing. And what this allows me to do, you remember if I'm using, say, lot tracking for pharmaceutical type items, and I ever need to perform a recall, then I can choose the lots that are in the system. So here's the lot that we entered earlier with a quantity of 5, and I can process this as a recall. I'll also be able to see any transactions associated with that lot, because obviously I'm going to need to communicate this potentially to people that have received or used this particular lot. So once I post it, it sets it with that status. And then equally, I can perform a release if I know that whatever work has been done on the recall has had a positive outcome. So I just thought I'd show you that, given the theme of the lot numbering that I've been showing earlier today. You can also perform splits and combine lots as well. I would have liked to have shown Stocktake Process, because it's one of those areas that you could spend probably 15 minutes alone on. But what I always like to say to customers that aren't familiar with the Stocktake Process is this whole folder called IC Physical Inventory follows a logical sequence from left to right. So number one, you generate an inventory worksheet. Now, a lot of people switch off default quantity on hand when doing this. And the reason they do that is so that when counts are taking place, the count staff don't actually get to see a quantity on hand, and therefore are not biased in terms of what they're counting. Now, I could have left that switched on and then ran the report and deselected quantity. This is a previous one I must have set up. I'll just untick quantity and run that again. So here we have a count sheet. And then next we go to physical inventory quantities and enter the counts. Now sometimes you may not want to use this particular screen, and that's why inventory counts is here as well. So it's slightly less cluttered screen for entering quantity counted, but more importantly it also hides the quantity in the system amount. So again, just trying to lead to more unbiased data entry from a Stocktake point of view. So that's the main difference between that screen and that screen. And then finally, we can run a report that shows the quantity counted. If I tick on show quantity items, show only items with quantity variance, it'll only flag up the ones where there's a difference between what's in the system and what's been counted. And then finally, posting a stock take, I must put in a number and description and reference. So there you have it. There's quite a deep look at some areas of inventory control. You can see it's quite a big module, so kind of hard to cover it all off in the time that we've got. But I hope that's kind of led you to some food for thought, particularly around pricing, and perhaps if lot tracking is something that you're interested in exploring more, please do let us know. And I hope that there's been some information there that you didn't already know and can now take back to your organisation.